All right. All right, y'all. We're doing this again. I had a I had an interweb challenge. Okay, I'm waiting for a couple other people to come on. I'm hunkered down in Shea Folsom here in Venice Beach, sheltering in place. Sheltering in place. And there's Michelle Dean, Ronnie Patton. Hi, guys. Good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning, morning. I'm going to wait for a couple more minutes. I'll fill some space really quickly. Hey, can everybody hear well? Somebody give me a thumbs up. Yes, got that thumbs up. Cool. Hey, while we wait for a couple other folks to come on, you can see a picture in that picture above the fireplace. Oh, it's kind of hard to do. That's from my neighbor and tribesman, Francisco Letelier, that painting. And it's about a deer vision that he had in Joshua Tree. It's kind of a magical work of art up there. Okay. Well, let's get rocking then. There he is. All right. Joshua Winter. All right, so tribes people, this is a Facebook Live in that I'm doing, and I'm going to do it every morning as long as we're locked in the house, because the resiliency is a function of kinship and connection and a sense of belonging. And so obviously this whole coronavirus is hitting our species right in the guts, because it's undermining the very core of our resiliency. And we're going to dig into a little bit of just the biochemical and social functions of how you create resiliency. But one of the big ones is connection with people. And that releases serotonin and oxytocin, and it makes us feel like we can get through things. And now, obviously, we're intentionally social distancing, and so that goes right into that big challenge. Forrest, what's up, brother? Glad to see you this morning. Some of my very favorite people connecting with us. So there is an attempt to explore and maybe carve out some remote or virtual kinship, which will help us with some resiliency. And obviously, we're not going to be getting the serotonin boost if I could, give you a high five or give you a hug. However, I do believe that there are some other dynamics related to resiliency that are beyond just the physical connection. And that's some of the stuff that I want to explore and share with you guys. Please comment. Please ask some questions. And yeah, Forrest, thank you, brother. Back at you, my man. I see you. So there are some other things that drive resiliency beyond the physical connection. And I want to give you guys a little bit of backstory on some of the big historical dynamics of resiliency. And one of them, and I just titled this particular Facebook Live, Fight in the Shade, because that's a very famous anecdote from the Spartans, that when they were fighting King Xerxes, who had 1,000,000-man army, and his courier came to Leonidas and said, "Give up now, because we have so many archers that our arrows will blot out the sun." And Leonidas reportedly responded by saying, "Well, that's all good. Then we'll have our fight in the shade." And I think that lands with people because it's a nice piece of bravado. It's a good retort. But it also is a metaphor. And the best mythology and the best stories, they echo our own personal experience as a metaphor. And we live in a high chronic stress time. We are overwhelmed by feelings of inadequacy, of abandonment, of imposter syndrome. We're wondering if we have purpose, if we're enough. And so we are living in this place where we are besieged by arrows constantly. And the arrows are never going away. We are always going to be crippled by comparisons and crippled by social media and all these things, we have to learn how to fight in that shade. So resilience is a big thing from that. And it turns out that there are a lot of cultures, even contemporary to our time, where people are suffering way more actual trauma than we are. And they seem to be having much more resiliency, lower anxiety, lower depression, lower symptoms of post-traumatic stress. So, for example, Israel is one of those. And obviously, Israel is a country surrounded by mortal enemies, and yet they still seem to be tracking pretty high in their resiliency numbers. Similarly, if you go back to World War II, the Nazis bombed London every night as an attempt to break the backs of their culture, their society, their people. And so the English set up all these booths with mental health professionals and counselors to try to ward off some of that crippling trauma. And it turns out that the opposite was true. And instead of breaking their psyches, it actually welded them together. And anxiety went down during the bombings of London. Depression went down. Suicide went down. And so there is a thing called trauma bonding, which is the silver lining of all of the social distancing and the challenges we're having now. This chronic stressful situation can actually weld us together. And a nice analogy of that is if a bone heals, if you break a bone and it heals correctly, if you take time, if you immobilize it, and if you support it, the broken bone is actually stronger after it heals. And the same thing is true with families and relationships and cultures, is that if we can support, if we can take care, if we can heal, then these type of adversities, this coronavirus, stock market challenges, financial, all of the stuff that we're experiencing right now can actually weld us together in a more robust fashion. So how do we do it? What did they have in Brother Sterling? Glad you're reading Tribe. That's a big one. Great book. So it turns out that it wasn't just the physical proximity that was welding people together. It was shared purpose. So shared purpose, and which is another way in the business world of saying vision, is one of the primary drivers of resiliency. And that's going to be a big question for all of us. And it's one of the things that we can share virtually. When POWs or prisoners of any sort, but primarily POWs who are in incredibly stressful situations, generally morale was pretty high as long as they could hold on to some form of connection. And they would tap out messages to each other. And many times, the simple act of that they had a shared vision, which is being part of the same military force, the same country, that allows prisoners of war to be able to be resilient in the face of incredible challenges. So here we are. Obviously, we're not POWs, but we're all ensconced in our own worlds, and we can do better than just tapping out messages to each other. So, hi Sarah, and there's my dad, Dr. Michael Folsom. Sarah, Allison, how are you? Yesenia, good to see you. I just noticed I was drinking my Valor cup. Valor! This is an organization that I started with my brother Joshua Wenner, who is actually on this Facebook Live right now. And I'm not sure how he can join me, but I would love to have him join me if he can. We started Valor as a means of responding intentionally to certain cultures in our larger society that are on the front lines of dealing with trauma. And those are our first responders, veterans, ER nurses. There's a lot of really, really challenging cultures within our society that are right on those front lines. And I refer to them as that canary in the coal mine of our mental health conversation. They're the ones that are being thrust into the most chronically stressful and high trauma careers. And as to be expected, they are experiencing much higher clinical anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, suicide rates, addiction. So they're the canaries that are dying first, and it would behoove us to start being aware of what their situation is, because the numbers are tracking exactly the same. And we're looking at inner city school teachers. They're right after emergency room nurses, and society seems to be skewing that direction. A male suicide is up 38% in the last 10 years or so. So there's some very sobering statistics that for me, at least, they're scarier than the coronavirus. And so we started Valor as a way to provide some of the medicine of resiliency. So that's the backstory on it. I'm going to divide this conversation up into two different categories. There's cultural resiliency, which is what we do as a family. It's interpersonal. It's what we do with our jobs, our neighborhoods, and ultimately our whole society. And that's the bigger conversation that holds all of us, and it seems to be driven by a sense of belonging and kinship. And those are ideas that are incredibly powerful, and they can be increased. We actually can create kinship. There are some tools for that, and we're going to unpack those. And then the other version of resiliency is individual, and it's the individual protocol. It's the way that we can build systems and practices and rituals that will keep us resilient during these challenging times. And so my brother Joshua Wenner is really really brilliant at all these. And if he doesn't come on this Facebook Live, then I'll share some of his work. I think he'd be fine with that. All right. So a couple things. We'll start with culture resiliency first. And Janet, Sarah, hey guys, if anybody has any questions about any of these things, if you'd like a reading list, if a commentary, I'll try to look at those. Sometimes it's kind of hard for me to live in this technological world where I'm managing multiple things. So I'll do my best on all that. Okay, Josh was saying he needs to add me. I don't know how to do that. Pin comment, invite friends. Stand by. Invite. Well, I don't know how to do that, good sir. I'll tell you what, tomorrow morning, when we chop it up, I will have Sarah, I'll get you a reading list or a listening list. And for the ladies, great book to start with, Women Who Run with the Wolves. Great book for the ladies. It's kind of the bookend, no pun intended, for Iron John, which is just mandatory reading for men to maintain. Sarah, I don't know how to invite him. All right. So let's rattle through some interpersonal cultural resiliency stuff, and then we'll Man's Search for Meaning. Yes, Forrest. Viktor Frankl. Absolutely. So belonging and kinship is the number one driver of resiliency on an interpersonal level. This is what you can do with your family, your community, your work. And we are built for kinship. That's our operating system as a species. In fact, kin is the root of the word kind, right? So the way we treat our kinsmen and women is with kinness or kindness. So what is that? Well, it turns out that kinship means I'm sharing three primary things. One of them is I'm sharing a common vision or purpose. And there it is, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Nietzsche even said it, that If you have a purpose, if you have a meaning, which is your why, then you can withstand any how and any what, which means if we have a purpose, then I will continue to survive. Even if I'm a POW, even if I'm trapped in my house and running short on toilet paper, I'm not. It just seems to be kind of the ongoing joke. Then you'll be able to withstand that. That's resiliency. Okay? So that's one of the components of kinship. The other one is some shared values. And again, that's that sense of belonging. It means that I'm part of the same culture. And it's one of the reasons why forest Marines are so resilient, right? When you talk about the shared values of a culture, there are groups that when they hold those and live those values, then it becomes a code. And people who share the same code inherently having exponentially higher resiliency. And then the last one is if we're doing something together. And this is kind of that trauma bonding thing that when we are doing a project together, then it tends to weld us together because we see each other as an extension of ourselves. And this connects back to almost being a pack hunting species. And we recognize the collaborative and reciprocal nature of human relationships. It's absolutely vital, and that increases resiliency. So it's your why. So make sure you have a shared common why, whether you call that purpose or meaning or vision. Secondly, shared values. This is that sense of belonging and your creed that you live by. And third, share projects together. Find ways to have partnership, collaboration, and reciprocal relationships happening. So those three things are the building blocks of kinship. And kinship is almost synonymous with belonging as it relates to resiliency. So leaders out there, really, really important that you shape your environment to be able to level up those three dynamics because you're increasing resiliency when you do that. It's just a psychological tipping point. Similarly, from a leadership perspective, vulnerability is a component of kinship. We need to be able to express ourselves. We need to be able to ask for help. And for most people in our society, because we are so isolated and we're living in such a pride-based culture, we will not ask for help because it's a sign of weakness. It's a sign of a lack of being competitive. There's a whole slew of things that will stop us from asking for help. And so we're waiting to trust people before we are expressing our vulnerability. And leaders, how you create trust is expressing vulnerability. So for leaders, it's the opposite. We express vulnerability first, other people then will start trusting us. And in the larger society, we're looking at trust as an example of behavior over time. And we don't have time to do it. We simply don't have time to build trust within our relationship. So leaders, express vulnerability because people will then start trusting, and that seems to drive kinship and belonging as well. Secondly, honor. This is a big one. Honor is the opposite of pride as it relates to operating systems from a cultural standpoint. Pride is my needs first. I will buy all the toilet paper. That is an example of a pride-based culture. Run amok. Honor is interpersonal. It means my relationship with you is more important than what I feel about myself. And honor, it turns out, is our core operating system. And it's tribe. Honor is also, like my brother Forrest on here now, those are the Marines. That's honor. And honor systems are still existing kind of under the hood of our current civilization. But honor is people who share honor-based systems, like those POWs, like the people in Israel right now, like the British who were bombed during World War II. Those are honor-based cultures. And resiliency is inherently higher in honor-based cultures. So if we can start leveling up that, and I understand that's a kind of a bigger conversation then we'll be vastly more resilient and more successful. And isolation is killing it. Isolation is one of those things that is separating us and challenging. So, the three big things that drive cultural resiliency are that big sense of belonging. Okay, number one, shared purpose, whether you call that meaning or vision. Number two, and creating reciprocal interpersonal relationships that are honor based. Those are the three big ones from a cultural standpoint. Okay. Now we're going to start pivoting to individual stuff, but in closing about culture, the thing that ties all those three components up is the platinum rule. And for you guys who've never been through any of my workshops, the platinum rule is basically an upgrade of the golden rule. And the golden rule is you want to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's pride-based. It means we are trying to hit a baseline of superficial behavior that will stop us from undermining or taking advantage of each other in social situations. But the golden rule means I'm going to treat everybody watching here in the same way that I want them to treat me, which means that we are exactly the same and we have the same needs and the same priorities. And that simply is not true. We are a species of intensely individual, specialized members of a team. So if I'm treating everybody the same, then I have inherently surrendered my kinship-based systems. So the platinum rule means instead of treating you like I want to be treated, I'm going to treat you like you want to be treated. And that's a vastly more impactful and resilient relationship dynamic. But I need to know what you need, who you are at a very, very intimate level. And that's one of the reasons why vulnerability is so important. Vulnerability is part of that connection. It drives resiliency as well. So for those of you guys who know me at all, I do a lot of work around the archetypes, which are that quadrant-based system. And I just pulled this is my challenge coin for King of the Four Houses. And those are the four archetypes. We got the king and the queen, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. They all require different means of support and of communication and cadence and priorities. That's the platinum rule. We need to know each other at that level. That creates that sense of belonging and resiliency. So that's the cultural things that we can do. And this, I think, is a platform that can kind of help with that. Mike Dyer, hi, brother. Hi, cuz. Tracy, good to see you. John Bard, my brother, really great to see you as well. Mike Dyer, I miss you, man. Patrick Bond, another one of my good brothers. Another sober Jedi and a fellow meditator. We're going to get down to sobriety meditation here in a minute as well. Okay, so pivoting into my brother Joshua's realm, which is, I'm going to share some of his work about individual resiliency. And I will start with the premise that we will not rise to the occasion, which we all want to. It's like, well, when things get challenging, then you'll see my best. And the reality is we do not rise to the occasion. We settle to our level of training. We fall back to whatever our baseline of habitual behavior is. And for most of us who haven't spent time in building resiliency and building ways that we are going to habitually respond to challenges, then we fall back to some pretty dysfunctional adolescent behavior. And a lot of it is me first. I will buy all the toilet paper. Or it's addiction, or it's isolation, or it's depression, or it's bullying. So these are all really maladaptive ways of non-resilient function. So the better way that we can do that is recognizing that we need to explore our reactions. And these are habits, okay? Habits are very, very different than practices because habits are built only for efficiency. They're not intentionally crafted for some altruistic or high performance outcome. our habits were just the thing that we do with regularity because it allowed us to get through the day, and they're usually very, very old, our habits. So if we want to actually create some protocol and some responses that will take us into some new territory, and it relates to resiliency, the conversation today, we need to start exploring our habits and modifying them into things that will get the results that we want, and those are practices. Okay? And practices are always hard, but that's the game. It's one of the reasons why meditation is so important. And I've got a whole slew of men and women on this Facebook Live right now who are meditators, and it's great to see you here. Meditation, just in a nutshell, and I think I'll do a whole Facebook Live on meditation, and I'll figure out how to do guests, and because there's a lot of people who have some really, really wonderful practices and rituals around meditation. But meditation allows you to disidentify from your thoughts, your emotions, and your sensations, and that allows you to be able to respond. Which means you're not running your autopilot habitual responses anymore. You're actually elevating consciousness, and this is the first stage to realize that you can choose. Okay, choice is a function of awareness. Really important dynamic. And earlier on, we were talking about if you have a broken bone, then if you support it, and if you're aware of it, and you take the time to heal it, it heals stronger. But if you don't realize you have a broken bone, and you keep walking around on it, then not only will it not heal, but it will heal in a very disfigured, malformed, maladaptive way. So consciousness is that first stage that increases awareness. And with the our valor work with warriors, we have a protocol that's called CPR. Pretty easy to remember. So C is consciousness and choice. We need to be aware that we are in a traumatized state. And if we're not aware that we have anxiety, if we're not aware that we're feeling depressed, if we're not aware that we're utilizing coping mechanisms just to avoid the experiences we're having, if we don't have the consciousness and awareness of that, then we're just going to be flying blind, and we will have lost our executive function. And basically that's what goes offline first when we're traumatized, is we just start running from that limbic system driven by our amygdala. Our body gets awash with norepinephrine and cortisol and adrenaline, and all of those things over a period of time are the stuff that is killing us as a species. So when we are in chronic stress and chronic cortisol, we start having a lot of immune issues. We start putting on weight. We start dealing with getting diabetes and heart disease. So cortisol is a very, very useful thing in a short period of time. And we need to realize that when we are in that activated, triggered state, such as go out and drive around, it's a very triggering experience to realize that the streets are empty. It's very zombie movie-esque out there, and to wonder, will I have enough food? Will I have a job? How are my loved ones doing? These are all inherently traumatizing things, and trauma is that sense of perceived risk to your physical or emotional well-being, and that's happening right now, and it's actually happening regularly. So to become aware of what our trauma signs are, and a great window into looking at what your trauma signs are, and also what your kinspeople trauma signs are. Do a little work on the four archetypes, because when you see people acting out and reacting and expressing trauma signs, it gives you a very good window into what their archetype is, and it will allow you to support them in an appropriate manner. So this again is back to that sense of belonging. All right, so the first one, consciousness. Raise your consciousness. Start becoming aware of what your trauma signs are. If you are triggered, if you are activated, if you are expressing some reactive coping mechanisms. And there's a lot of stuff with that. Overeating, eating junk food, drinking, over drinking. There's a lot of things. So that's number one. Secondly, Stop reacting. Pause. So the P for CPR is to pause. Make a tactical pause. We don't have the executive function happening when we're activated. It goes offline. We basically become reactive animals just looking for ways that we are going to either fight or flight or freeze. Those are the big three things that happen. And so before you start reacting, simply pause. And now all of a sudden we have the chance to go to the R, which is I can now regulate. This is the R. So we have consciousness and choice. We have pause, and now regulate. Get that parasympathetic nervous system back online. And there are a number of techniques for that, which I'll rattle over pretty quick now, and then I'd love to, I don't know if there's a way that I can share. I will actually type this up for you guys, and I'll share it online as well. So regulation, how we get our parasympathetic nervous system back online so that we can have that executive function, so we can now live altruistically, and now I can respond to the situation appropriately. Number one, breathe. When we breathe, particularly a 6-count breath, which is count to 6 breathing in, count to 6 breathing out. This is the core of most spiritual practice, is intentional breathing. So whether you call that chanting or prayer or meditations with a mantra, it has to do with your breath. And it turns out that any type of intentional breath work activates your vagus nerve, which gets you into your heart. And that's a really important thing for absorbing cortisol and turning on your parasympathetic nervous system, which regulates you. Okay, so breath work. Paige, how are you? Good to see you. Good to see you. Say hi to my boy Aaron. Great to see you as well. Caitlin, Jamie. Hey, I know you got news. Congratulations, all the good stuff. Okay, 6-count breath, really, really important. The second one is meditation. Okay, meditation is central. And we talked about that before. Meditation seems to include breath work as well. And that establishes a whole new protocol of being able to respond to situations. Very, very important. Second one, when you're regulating, play offense. Start doing productive things, whatever that means for you. And sometimes productive things are walk around the block, walk the dog, turn off your social media and read a book, do some writing, do something that is forward focused. And it's really important psychologically for humans. And at the risk of going completely tangential, it's one of the basically central things of humanity, that we have the ability to sacrifice what our needs are at the moment so that we can have something better in the future. And these are our temporal lobes in the side of our brain that allows us to understand time, and the fact that if I eat all of my deer now, I will have no deer tomorrow. We're the only animal that really does that intentionally. And so sacrificing things for, that I want to do right now, like eating the donut. Well, that eating the donut is not going to make you feel good after you finish the donut, or smoking the pack of cigarettes, or whatever that coping mechanism is that you have. So once you've done consciousness, pause, regulate, respond and recommit to your practices that make you feel optimistic. This is just, like depression, anxiety protocol 101. We have to do positive things. Gratitude is a component to that, right? So breath work, meditation, gratitude is all really important. Any kind of exercise, and that is true not only for what you get from it, which is health and fitness, and you feel better and you look better and you're more accepted socially and all of these things, but you're releasing a whole slew of your well-being hormones. your dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin and all those things that are kind of the soup of resiliency. So exercise, and none of us want to, right? Particularly, we can't go to the gym, we can't do things together. But in prison, right? And we're kind of like in a luxury prisons right now with internet and food. But you still work out. So we can do push-ups, we can do sit-ups, we can do squats, we can do lunges, we can do jump rope. So find those things and recommit to them. And let's find some things socially that we can hold each other accountable for our prison workouts. And that's part of resiliency. That's part of that practice. Okay. Anything with animals. Animals, those beautiful furry creatures that we partner with on a daily basis. When we pet our dogs, that releases serotonin, and it's reciprocal. So there's a reason why we have those animals with us. So if you have animals, spend some time with those. And then just to kind of get to a closure piece. Hi, Wendy. Alvin. Yes. Hope you're doing well, brother. Joshua's talking about the 6 count out. Yeah. Okay. So what my brother Joshua was talking about is the out breath on the 6 count is the thing that actually is the manual pump for our parasympathetic nervous system. And you have to do this for a couple minutes, people. So kind of bundle it in with your meditation. So 6 count in. And if you are one of those people that has a fancy Apple Watch, I do not. There's a way that you can track your even heartbeat. You can track if you're dropping back into your parasympathetic nervous system. And that 6 count breath, you can watch it go down. It's really a great tool just to get that biofeedback. So lastly, in terms of what we can do to increase our resiliency, do anything that connects you with other people. And you'll notice I'm intentionally not saying go out and hug your neighbors because it's not that time right now. But this is part of that. Instead of texting your friends, your tribe, call them. At the very least, we can hear each other's voices. And this is anything that increases belonging is really, really important. Recommit to your purpose. Why are you here? If we can have that why, then we can withstand any what. So we all have some reason for being here. And for a lot of the young folks who are watching this, you may not have found your purpose and the meaning of life, and you're not supposed to. You're probably going to happen in your 40s, right? But you can follow your passions. That even you may not be able to do what you want to do and express yourself the way you want to express yourself. There's something in your environment right now. There's some way that you can move your passion forward. So write, draw, do art, do something that moves your passion forward, because when you have followed the scent trail of passion and you find out where that passion connects with people, that's your purpose. And people with purpose are resilient as hell. You cannot stop us. Okay, so belonging, purpose, and then lastly, do things honorably. Live well. Have that sense that you are in alignment with your values. Do the work on that. And it's hard to do by yourself. So virtually connect with your brothers and sisters. And I've been showing you this coin now and then. This is our challenge coin this is our men's group that Joshua and I formed called King of the Four Houses. Gentlemen, if there's anybody who's listening right now and feeling isolated, King of the Four Houses is going to be having virtual Zoom meetings for the next month. And we are going to be resilient. We are going to hold each other accountable. We're going to get in better shape while we're in our prisons, working out like a bunch of savages. And we're going to keep doing our good work. So, gentlemen, if you're interested in being part of this and getting some accountability during these challenging times, feel free to pop on over. We have a group called King of the Four Houses, and we'll invite you to the work that we're doing. All right, Zoom. Yes, we'll be having a Zoom call for King of the Four Houses. All right, guys. God bless you all. And I guess one of my favorite blessings, and I think we need to give each other blessings, is this is from Rabbi Hillel from, boy, must have been 1,000 years ago. And a lot of you guys have heard me say this, but it's a good reminder. 3 questions. If you are not for yourself, then who will be? So take care of yourself out there, people. Secondly, if you are not for others, then what are you? Okay, so this is that honor. And lastly, if not now, when? So don't wait to start your life or your career or follow your passions so this coronavirus is over. We do it now. This is the time when we do it. We do our work even in the face of adversity and even in the shade of uncounted arrows. We still fight in the shade. So take care of yourselves, serve others, and do it now. This is our time. Have a great day, Wendy. There's my lovely wife, Tanya. And Michelle Dean, love you. Forrest, love you, bro. And hey, tomorrow, 10 o'clock, let's chop it up more. And I will have other people. I'll have other people on here, so you won't have to hear me go blah, 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 blah. And let's keep doing this. Keep fighting in the shade, people. All right.